Welcome, welcome. Creation in crisis is evolving to reflect the changes that humanity is collectively creating. We are now global kinship, exploring the evolving noosphere, and we would welcome you into this new venture. Your hosts are Penny Andrews, Bob Eisenberger, and myself, Gil Ransom. You might be familiar with other names for the noosphere: the global brain, planetary mind, oneness, consciousness, and the beloved community, among others. It is where the shift is shifting and the emergent is emerging. The noosphere is a collective human consciousness. It is evolving into a third layer around our biosphere and around our geosphere. And it has been forming since the first humans had their first aha moments. It is now inventing and revealing itself at an exponential pace across the globe, in homes, communities, workplaces, and the World Wide Web. While we are becoming more conscious and more complex as individuals, we are increasingly influenced by and connected to others, some who sit across the table from us and some who live on the other side of the globe. Hence the word kinship in our title. Albert Einstein's quote takes on new meaning in this evolutionary moment. He said, "We cannot solve today's problems with the same mentality that created them." We offer the Global Kinship webinars in support of this new mentality, rising synchronistically around the world. We hope you will join us on this first Thursday of every month as we explore the emerging noosphere in search of our global kin. Welcome.
Just a couple of housekeeping items, if I might, before we start. We ask that you keep yourself muted unless until we're down to the Q&A session, a portion of our session, in which you will need to, of course, remember to unmute in order to when you're called on. At that time as well, if you have a question, I ask that you go to your Zoom toolbar where it says reactions. And if you click on that, you'll see the words raise hand. And that will put a little raised hand in the corner of your video and let the rest of us know that you're in line to ask a question. If you have any other questions, feel free to text me in the chat. And now, Penny has some words for us.
Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning. I see Margie from Australia with us, and I'm sure other parts of the world are here as well. So whatever time of day it is, let's take a minute just to bring ourselves fully present to the moment that is, containing all that is. And the most ever-present way to do this is to connect with the breath. So I invite you to center into your breath. And with each exhale, release anything that is not needed in this moment.
Whoops. Recording? No. I just hit a webinar that was supposed to start. And they're recording, but you're not being recorded. I'm sorry. I wondered if I was even in the right day for it. I just hit it. It's going to be there. So.
Please mute yourself kindly. Thank you.
And as your body relaxes into this moment, notice how these creative and wonderful minds join in the relaxing. The Japanese have a word, ichigo, ichie, that means there is no other moment like this in time. We only have this moment. And what a moment it is. I have the honor of introducing my mentor. Matthew Fox is a theologian, educator, and author of 40 books that have been translated into 68 languages, and more than half of them became New York bestsellers. He spent 45 years developing and teaching the tradition of creation spirituality, and in so doing has reinvented forms of education and worship. Millions around the world have awakened to the much neglected earth-based mystical traditions of the West through this work. Matthew's conception of creation spirituality seeks common ground with numerous faiths in an approach that he calls deep ecumenism. It is also a green theology, emphasizing a holy relationship between humanity and nature. Matthew has been pointing to a vision of a more alive and compassionate world throughout his life. The following has been said of him. About his first book, Original Blessing, Professor John Cobb said, Matthew's accomplishment was to recover a form of spirituality and show its profound relevance and importance for our time. In due course, it will take its place in the history of spirituality and indeed in the history of theology. Mirabai Starr writes, there is not another man on the planet who has championed the sacred feminine with a fraction of the wisdom, scholarship, creative fire, and holy chutzpah as Matthew Fox. And interfaith pioneer and monk Bede Griffiths said of creation spirituality, it is the spirituality of the future. Global Kinship is here to speak about the spirituality of the future that is needed to become the spirituality of the now. And it is my great privilege and honor to introduce our speaker today, Matthew Fox.
Thank you, Penny, and thank you, Gail and Bob, for bringing us together again. It's good to be with you all and be part of your redefining your nomenclature and taking on the issue of noosphere. I appreciated Gail's succinct synonyms: the global brain, the planetary mind, the beloved community, and kinship with all creation. So it seems like another stage in our evolution as human beings, and of course, creation spirituality. So what I'll be talking about today is Teilhard de Chardin, who came up with that phrase, the noosphere, and Carl Jung. Because I wrote a major article on them. It really was meant to be a chapter for a book on Teilhard de Chardin and Jung, but at the last minute, my paper was rejected by the publisher, not by the person who put out the call for papers. He loved it, but the publisher just refused to put it in the book at the last minute. So it was never published, and I haven't bothered to put it out in the world that much. So I'll be sharing some things with you. Let me begin with Teilhard de Chardin's statement on noosphere, which actually is found in my book, Creation Spirituality, page 221. He writes, an ever-increasing number of persons, and of course, he died in 1955, so this is 75 years old or so, are beginning to distinguish a noosphere, which is like a halo around the biosphere. Noosphere, the living membrane, which is stretched like a film over the lustrous surface of the star which holds us, Now, I do think he made a mistake there. The Earth is not a star. So I think he's talking about the Earth, but who am I to correct Teilhard de Chardin? But I do think he's talking about the Earth and not a star. He must have had a bad night. An ultimate envelope, taking on its own individuality and gradually detaching itself like a luminous aura. This envelope was not only conscious, but thinking. The very soul of the earth, the very soul of the earth. I do want to caution as we begin, my strong opinion, that we want to be careful that we don't think of consciousness and thinking as just a human thing. I think the whales are conscious and I think they're doing their thinking. I think the trees are conscious and they're doing their thinking, and so forth. So I think there's a danger. And of course, we're the ones, I know I'm a few miles from Silicon Valley who think we're making web and all that. But the real web is much bigger than what humans are making money on. And so I just want to caution, there's a built-in, I think, anthropocentric bias, Pope Francis would call a species narcissism, even in talking about the noosphere. So I do see it as an aura, or halo, if you will, but where all the good thoughts and minds of Earth are sending our love and our wisdom out to create this halo. And I do think if you think of it the way the astronauts talk about it, looking back at Earth, and I was reading just the other day another testimony by an astronaut and how he literally cried when he was, no, it wasn't an astronaut, one of these people who recently went up in one of these spaceships. He found that one window in the spaceship, you saw the Earth and it was everything you thought it would be, but the other, you saw the darkness, the pitch darkness of space. And he said that he was moved by both, but they were very different spiritual and emotional experiences. And the darkness scared him, whereas the Earth welcomed him and loved him. But he actually cried because he felt that we who are on Earth were not grateful enough, reverent enough, thankful enough for our place here. So I think the stories and the images we're getting from space are part of this noosphere, of course. They're just giving us context, perspective on our existence. And just yesterday, there was an amazing article on the internet. And the title was, according to simulations, the Milky Way is 1 in a million. And it went on about how we found other galaxies that are similar to a Milky Way, spiral and all that. But that scientists are completely surprised at how unique, what we're now finding, how unique our setting is as a galaxy. So not only is our Earth still very unique, but our galaxy is. And it explained it in terms of something that I've not heard about before, but what they call the wall of galaxies, that usually galaxies like ours have a small wall, but our wall is exceptionally large, and a wall is made up of other galaxies. So I was really struck by this. I mean, we're obviously just in kindergarten learning about the universe, and we have this wonderful instrument now, the Webb telescope, which is surely part of our noosphere. But we have so much to learn. But one thing that I mean, I was just stunned by this, that not only we know we have a galaxy, but it's, and they use the word surprising and astounding and rare about our galaxy. So not only is our planet still pretty astounding and surprising and rare, but so too is the contextual matrix in which we find ourselves. So I think we should enter any discussion about noosphere with a very open mind and heart. And we have a lot to learn, and it's exciting that we are a species that is able to ask these questions and find ways to come across some answers. So now to the topic of Jung and Teilhard. One thing that's very interesting to me, I learned this from Steve Herman, who is a Jungian analyst and a friend of mine, who his article was accepted for that book, and Jung and Teilhard, along with several others people's. But he said that in his last days, Teilhard de Chardin's book was on Jung's night table, that he was reading Teilhard in his very last days. It's kind of sad, actually, that they met so late. And Jung was in a rather depressed state, I guess, in his last years. But he did find Teilhard. Now, of course, one reason it was late, this encounter of the two, is that Teilhard's books were forbidden to be published by the Vatican, so and the Jesuit order. And so, of course, his books weren't published until after 1955 when he died. And I think, I don't remember for sure, but I think Jung died around 1962. I'm not sure. But of course, it took time to get his books into print. And one smart thing Teilhard did was he did not leave his manuscripts in the hands of the Jesuit order. He left them in the hands of a woman friend who got them dispersed, printed and dispersed and translated. But that was a really wily and smart thing of Teilhard to do as a last decision in his life. He went through an awful lot, as you know, with his order and with Rome. In fact, they literally exiled him to China, thinking they'd never hear from him again. And then, when that long period was up, and he did a lot of scientific work in China, of course, then he ended up in New York, and he actually wanted to go back to France to die, which is where he's from. He taught in the university, by the way, where I attended, the Institut Catholique, Paris, but he got ejected from there in the 20s. He taught in the science department, but even then he was doing too much philosophizing for the ecclesial powers that be back then. But Jung, of course, just to go into a little bit of a story, remember that his father was a very severe Swiss preacher. And of course, both the Calvinist school in Switzerland, the Zwingli school, and especially the Calvin school, were, what should I say, pretty patriarchal, very patriarchal. And very much in the fall redemption tradition of Christianity. And it was Calvin who said that if God had formed us of the stuff of the sun or the stars, we might say that our beginning was honorable. But when someone is made of clay, who pays any attention to him? Who are we? We are all made of mud. And this mud is not just on the hem of our gown or on the sole of our boots or in our shoes. We are full of it. We are nothing but mud and filth, both inside and outside. So that's Calvin. And it was that kind of milieu in which his father operated. And needs to say, Jung was turned off at a very young age to Christianity, to this version of Christianity. So he writes about his first communions, and I quote, "Slowly I came to understand that this communion had been a fatal experience for me." That's a strong word, fatal. It had proved hollow. More than that, it had proved to be a total loss. Why, that is not religion at all, I thought. It is an absence of God. The church is a place I should not go to. It is no life which is there, but death. I was seized with the most vehement pity for my father. All at once I understood the tragedy of his profession and his life. He was struggling with a death whose existence he could not admit. So that's how Jung looked back on his life in his autobiography written near the end of his life. And so Christianity died for Jung the day of his first communion. I guess there's something of a prodigy. And he goes on, my sense of union with the church and with the human world, so far as I knew it, was shattered. I had, so it seemed to me, suffered the greatest defeat of my life. The religious outlook which I imaged constituted my sole meaningful relation with the universe. It had disintegrated. I could no longer participate in the general faith. Found myself involved in something inexpressible, a secret which I could share with no one. It was terrible. And this was the worst of it, vulgar and ridiculous, also a diabolical mockery. I was an outsider. This knowledge filled me with a sadness which was to overshadow all the years till the time I entered the university. So, I mean, that's an incredibly negative experience with religion and very articulately put forward by Jung. So you can see the origins of his vocation, of his wanting to heal people who were subjected to the same religious abuse that he felt. And later, of course, he said that he's less interested in helping people with their psychological neuroses than he is with introducing them to the numinosity of life. So he moved on from religion, certainly, to a deep exploration into spirituality. And as a young man, as a teenager, he read Eckhart. And he said Eckhart is the one place he found the breath of life. Now, you might want to read or reread my book on Eckhart with a chapter on Jung and Eckhart, because that particular chapter, of course, goes through a lot of this journey of Jung's vis-a-vis creation spirituality as articulated by Meister Eckhart, because Jung was he quotes Eckhart over 38 times in his writings. So he was very immersed in Eckhart. He wrote a major essay just on Eckhart, Eckhart on the Relativity of God, it's called. So, as I say, Jung came very late to Teilhard, and really too late to, I think, absorb the optimism, if you will, of Teilhard. I think that Jung suffers from a missing or a wounded via positiva. Obviously, his work on the shadow, the via negativa, is profound and important. And of course, he lived through the times of Hitler and the Second World War, and he has a lot to say about that. But and of course, his via creativa is extremely strong. Much of his healing of his own self came through mandalas, as well as of his many patients. And he certainly encourages the whole world of archetypes and of art as a technique for self-healing and healing of others. So he's certainly not short on the Via Creativa. His red book is that, is a book of his dreams, his active imagination. And that was a very important phrase for him, active imagination. That's pure Via Creativa. And of course, dreams, which he called, quote, the word of God, unquote. And of course, his appreciation of myth and his development of the archetype of his naming archetypes and using archetypes as so foundational for holding up and for lifting up our souls and our brokenness. But there is a passage in Jung that I think is very telling, and this is it, this sentence, quote, he's commenting on alchemy. Quote, this is not so much a reversion to antiquity as a continuation of that religious feeling for nature so alien to Christianity, which is expressed most beautifully in the secret inscription, the great magic papyrus of Paris. So notice, he's defining Christianity strictly in a fall redemption context. Christianity is a place where there is, quote, religious feeling for nature so alien to Christianity. So that's what I mean by saying he's missing the via positiva. Now, I'm not sure how he can miss it if he's as immersed in Meister Eckhart as he says he is, but it is true that many of the commentators on Eckhart over the centuries, since he was condemned by the church, were philosophical, not theological. And I think they've missed a lot of Eckhart's perspective of a creation-centered spirituality. For example, he's saying that isness is God. And that pretty much brings in everything, doesn't it? I think isness is another word for everything. All beings have isness. And of course, his development of the whole idea of the word of God, as he says, every creature is a word of God and a book about God. So it's kind of surprising to me that Jung misses that. I think this is why, frankly, the publisher threw my paper out. He's a Jungian, the publisher was a Jungian. And I don't think he liked my criticisms of Jung, to be honest. But this is where it is. So I think that Jung was strong in the via negativa, very strong, a real pioneer, regarding the shadow and all that, and very strong in the via creativa. But regarding the via positiva, I think he could have used a lot more Teilhard de Chardin than he absorbed. And of course, it was so late in life. It came too late for him, I think. And we'll get more into that when we turn to Chardin. And regarding the via transformativa, of course, at the level of individual healing and social healing, because Jung certainly talked about the collective and the unconscious being collective and the archetypes being collective and universal. There, he certainly had something to say about in the via transformativa too. So I would criticize him for being less than prophetic in relationship to Hitler and Nazism when it counted, and not really translating his psychology into the social healing of that we need. But I think he has a grounding for it there, a foundation, because he is critiquing the consciousness of our societies as well as individuals that, of course, when wounded, lead to so much projection. And I think that's a very important contribution of Jung, how projection itself is like a mortal sin, if you will, that if you can't get away from projection, we're not present to the world as it is. And it's much easier to project than it is to seek self-knowledge and to seek common truth. The Marxist philosopher Roger Garaudy in the 1960s gave a very important talk. He's, let's say, a Marxist philosopher, but He gave a talk at a Teilhard convention in 1966. And this is what he said about Teilhard, and I quote, by the way, since then, he's no longer a Marxist philosopher. He is now a Muslim. Roger Garaudy is. But back then, he was a Marxist philosopher and an atheist. But this is what he said about Teilhard. We find in Teilhard the optimism of a true master of joie de vivre, a true master of joie de vivre, joy of life. He does not present the world to us as a vale of tears, where men's main preoccupation would consist in expiating a primordial sin, i.e., original sin, but rather see the world as a construction site for the future, in which we are to construct confidently human unity. Well, I think that one phrase, that sentence, summarizes what Noosphere is about, and in fact, the way Gail introduced it today, that we're here to construct a future that is confident and has unity, and we've not inhaled a veil of tears and a primordial sin. So I think that's a wonderful summary of Teilhard. Interesting enough, from a Marxist in the 1960s. Now, Teilhard says, he wrote in 1923 in his Hymn of the Universe, for me, my God, all joy and all achievement, the very purpose of my being and all my love of life, all depend on this one basic vision of the union between yourself and the universe. Now, catch that. He's not saying between yourself and my individual soul, although our souls are the universe. If we can talk about the universe and explore the universe, we're out in the universe. That's the importance of realizing your soul is not in your body is in your soul. And your body travels with you and your soul travels with you. But I just think that one phrase is important. This one basic vision of the union between yourself and the universe. That's how Teilhard thought. He goes on, I have no desire, I have no ability to proclaim anything except the innumerable prolongations of your incarnate being in the world of matter. I can preach only the mystery of your flesh, you, the soul shining forth to all that surrounds us. Well, that's cosmic Christ talking, of course. That's cosmic Christ talk. The soul shining forth through all that surrounds us, embedded in matter, embedded in the flesh. So Teilhard is, of course, taking the traditional term of incarnation and saying it's not just Christ becoming human, but it's the divine incarnate in all of matter and all of time. And this is the cosmic Christ. And of course, he wrote about the Christ cosmique. And many people think, oh, he invented this term. But no, he didn't invent it. It seemed like an invention because the modern consciousness had been so out of touch with the universe, so anthropocentric, so narcissistic, that it rarely even noticed the teachings of the cosmic Christ that are found in Paul, the very first author in the Christian Bible. So what Teilhard is doing is resurrecting, if you will, the importance, especially the importance of a cosmic Christ consciousness in the 20th century, but he gets it from the tradition. Paul has it, Colossians 3, for example, that Christ holds together everything in heaven and on earth, holds it all together. And actually, that is borrowing from Jewish scriptures that says that wisdom holds everything together in the heavens and the earth. So Christ is understood by Christians as the wisdom incarnate. So it's absolutely ancient teaching, and you find it in the Gospel of Thomas, which also is probably as old as Paul's letters. And you find it in the Gospels themselves, in the creation stories, like Matthew's nativity story and so forth. But the point is that it seems like it's brand new. This guy's inventing it. Teilhard's not inventing it. He's bringing it alive, and with the help of his own poetic gifts, but also his science and the new interest in matter, you see, that and the universe that Einstein and others were, Hubble certainly, were bringing alive again after the mechanistic view of the universe that had dominated modern consciousness for several hundred years. The universe was a machine. Well, of course, Einstein exploded that, and Hubble exploded it even more. So this is everything that got Teilhard moving as a young scientist. And he goes on and he says, if we look at the world simultaneously from an evolutionary and a spiritual point of view, we shall see it as glowing with an irresistible attraction. Glowing. It's a beautiful word. That's a pure, again, cosmic Christ word. The Christ is radiating doxa and glory, therefore is glowing, and things are glowing. Remember, Hildegard says that. Every being is numinous. The world grows, the world tracks irresistibly. And he says, one who dares to believe reaches a state where everything becomes luminous, animated, living. Everything, not just living beings, stones too, galaxies, everything becomes luminous, animated, living. You can just see that he's kind of in the thrall. He's taken over by a cosmic Christ consciousness. He says, by the way, he calls the cosmic Christ the third nature of Christ. He says we've been fighting each other for centuries about the other two natures. How human is Jesus, or how godlike is Jesus? And is Jesus Christ and God and also human and fully human? All those fights that went on way back in the 4th century and so forth. But he says, here's the third understanding of Christ, the cosmic Christ. And I can't find anyone, he said, either layperson or theologian, who wants to talk about the third nature of Christ. Well, that's how out front Teilhard was. He was out front of the pack. He couldn't find anyone to talk this stuff with. Now, Carl Jung talks about the bridge from dogma to the inner experience of the individual has broken down. Let me say it again. The bridge from dogma to the inner experience of the individual has broken down. That's his analysis of the end of Christianity. And I think that's why people ask today, why are so many young people not in church? Well, there are many reasons. One is, of course, the corruption in high levels of priestly pedophilia and so forth. And another is just boredom. But the third is that the bridge from dogma to inner experience of the individual has broken down. In other words, spirituality is missing. And what you have is structure, including dogmas and doctrines, but where's the individual experience with all this? Well, that's exactly what the mystics do. That is exactly what's made spirituality different from religion. In another passage, another section, or Jung says this. He says Christianity is threatened with complete oblivion because, quote, it is of the highest importance that the education and enlightened public should know religious truth as a thing living in the human soul and not as an abstruse and unreasonable relic of the past. Well, you can see that Jung's soul, Teilhard's soul was alive, and it was alive with the presence of the cosmic Christ. And here's, Jung goes on. Too few people have experienced the divine image as the innermost possession of their own souls, the innermost possession of their own souls. Christ only meets them from without, never from within the soul. So long as religion is only faith in outward form, and the religious functions not experienced in our own souls, nothing of any importance has happened. You see, this is what happened to him at his first communion. It was an empty experience for him. It is yet to be understood that the Mysterium Magnum, the great mystery, is not only an actuality, but at first and foremost rooted in the human psyche. The person who does not know this from their own experience may be a most learned theologian, but has no idea of religion and still less of education. So this is the unchristian Christian, the unspiritual Christian that Jung is describing on the one hand. And now we have Teilhard bearing his soul, which includes the noosphere, because it includes his training as a scientist and his curiosity as a scientist, but also his love as a Christian, his experience of the cosmic Christ. Jung says, the gulf between the educated mind and the world of dogmatic ideas brings about an appalling lack of understanding that threatens the Christian religion with complete oblivion. Now, here is Teilhard, you might say, in response. You know, I'm trying to create kind of like a dialogue between Teilhard and Chardin, even though they never met. Teilhard says, there is a living thing in the human soul, not as an, wait a second. Your main purpose, he's addressing Christ when he's praying, second person. Your main purpose in this revealing to us of your heart was to enable our love to escape from the constrictions of the too narrow, too precise, notice precise, that's dogma, too narrow, too precise, too limited image of you, which we had fashioned for ourselves. And you probably know his statement about the enfeeblement of religion. Teilhard says, because it is not sufficiently moved by truly human compassion, because it is not exalted by sufficiently passionate admiration of the universe, our religion is becoming enfeebled. So he saw 30s, 40s, and a few years in the 50s that Christianity was becoming enfeebled because it was out of touch with the sense of the universe. And Teilhard says, Christ is not yet fully formed. The mystical Christ has not yet attained to this full growth, and therefore the same is true of the cosmic Christ, he says. These are just in the state of being and becoming. Christ is the endpoint of evolution and of all beings, and therefore evolution is holy. So you see, Teilhard was taking on the consciousness of evolution, and he was relating it, of course, to his deepest instincts as a Christian, and that includes the holiness of evolution. He says for him, the word evolution became a mantra. It became a holy word that he would repeat often because he felt evolution had the power in it to reinvigorate the Christ experience. Who is the cause of Christ for Teilhard? Quote, the cosmos is fundamentally and primarily living. Christ through his incarnation is internal to the world, rooted in the world, even in the very heart of the tiniest atom. So there's microcosm and macrocosm here. Christ is in the tiniest atom, and Christ is in the cosmos as a whole. Now, Jung talks about the Gnostic Christ, and this is interesting, but it also shows he could have used some Teilhard in his life, because he says this. He says, the Gnostic Christ, of whom we hear hints even in the Gospel according to John, symbolizes man's original unity and exalts it as a saving goal of his development. Consciousness is reunited with the unconscious. The unconscious person is made one with the center, which is also the center of the universe. And in this wise, the goal of man's salvation and exaltation is reached. But Jung applies this only to the Gnostic Christ. He doesn't have a cosmic Christ. He's never heard of it. And he also celebrates the divinization of humanity, which of course Teilhard does also, and Thomas Aquinas does. He says God became human in order that human may become gods. Jung says God will be begotten in creaturely man. Who is now raised to sonship, almost to the position of man-God, the unifier, mediator of God and creature. Christ probably had this possibility in mind. He who believes in me will also do the works I do, and greater than these. The future indwelling of the Holy Ghost in man amounts to a continuing education, the incarnation of God, a continuing incarnation of God. Well, that is very parallel to what Teilhard is saying too. But Jung does not use the term cosmic Christ. Here is what Jung says, though. The development of Western philosophy during the last 2 centuries, in other words, the modern era, has succeeded in isolating the mind in its own sphere and in severing it from its primal oneness with the universe. So we see that Jung also, like Teilhard, is in search of connecting mind to the universe again. Remember Thomas Aquinas, every human being, the greatest thing about the human person is that every human person is capax universi, capable of the universe. That's pre-modern thinking. That's Thomas Aquinas. Well, this is what was lost in the modern era, as Jung just said. But it's what Jung is yearning for and seeking, and it is what Teilhard is seeking. And that's what got Teilhard so excited. He thinks that evolution brings back cosmic Christ. Steve Herman, this Jungian analyst, said when I posed this question to him, Jung's scientific attitude and lack of knowledge of Chardin left his capacity for celebration of a cosmic Christ bereft. Now, an interesting book came out a few years ago when I was writing this that it was about Teilhard's letters. And I never read the book before I read this. I found it really interesting. He had a very close woman friend who would visit him in Peking and in China. She was actually from the Midwest, I think Chicago area. She was a powder by trade. And they were close friends. They did not have an affair, though. She wanted to, but he didn't. But they're very close friends. And he wrote her very personal letters. And he talks about a neo-Christianity grows stronger in me every day, he says, a neo-Christianity. He sees his vocation as, quote, promoting the birth of a new consciousness in the world. And he hoped that Christianity would cease to look backwards to the old forms of life, but instead would offer some desperate hope of a new world. He says, it is the future of the world and life that drives me decidedly to itself. What is the new world? From my scientific point of view, humanity cannot reach its evolutionary maturation unless ahead of him, he can recognize, or at least hope, that the world is not closed, but opens up to some higher type of existence. Otherwise, humans will get discouraged, bored, and stop pushing life further on by research and creative effort. Really a new world in which the whole set of human and Christian problems and values are strangely transformed and transfigured. This is the noosphere that Teilhard envisioned, that he hoped for. In humanity stepping forward to its next level of existence. The vision, he says, to which I devoted my life a vision of a universe converging by its own power of arrangement into a loving oneness. A loving oneness. This loving essence of everything needs to come forth through every effort, every pain, every joy. This is the road to happiness. So here's developing a new myth for our culture. And of course, Jung himself returns to he says, Christ is still the living myth of our culture. Jung said that. He is our culture hero. It is he who occupies the center of the Christian mandala. He is in us and we are in him. His kingdom is the pearl of great price, the treasure buried in the field, grain of mustard seed, which become a great tree, and the heavenly city. As Christ is in us, so also is his heavenly kingdom. So Jung himself took on this archetype of Christ and saw it everywhere in Jesus' teachings. And he himself uses the term heavenly kingdom. So I think both Teilhard and Jung are exploring what the kingdom of God would look like as different from the church or religion as it's currently constituted. Says Teilhard, I visualize a new dimension of God, the God of a moving and growing world, the true spirit of matter. So Teilhard was absolutely committed to the consubstantiality of matter and spirit, of getting over the dualism of separating spirit from matter. He talks about a rebirth of God, a religious revolution which rebirths God, and a new mysticism that includes a communion with evolution. And he says that the personalistic nature of the universe is a great Western discovery. He thinks that the East did not have a personalistic view of the universe. As he says, the essence of my gospel can be summarized by these simple words. Not only God is love, as St. John used to say, but the world is love. The world is love. And it is only fulfilled and takes on meaning to the extent that we submit to God and we join the divine through love. Love is a superior, stable, definitive form of all energy. And the highest forms of spiritual activity are one, to create, being mostly a question of intelligence, and the other, to unite, being finally a matter of love. So that is what his noosphere for him is in its fullest. It's an invitation to create, which includes science and technology and art and all the kind of creating we can do on the one hand, but it also means uniting, and that is love. So it's the mind alive with both knowledge and love. And of course, for me, that's what is meant by wisdom. That's why the word wisdom is bigger than knowledge. It embraces knowledge and love, the heart. Now, I want to say a few words about the archetype of the Eucharist, or the Christian ritual, because Jung was very big on the importance of rituals, as was Malidome Some, the great African ritual practitioner and teacher who lived in Oakland for many years. He sadly died last year. And he said there's no community without ritual. There's no community without rituals. So if we've lost our rituals, if our rituals are dead to us or boring, that we'll never be a community. We'll, we will not have that bonding and that love. Now, it's interesting that Jung threw out the Calvinist and Zwingli, the Swiss version of the liturgy, Christian liturgy, and instead identified with Luther, because he says Luther, against our Swiss reformer Zwingli, who said in a lame way that communion was a sort of symbol. But Luther defended the primitive point of view, that it was the real body and the real blood. And of course, Teilhard, because he was Roman Catholic, he shared, of course, that conviction with Luther that the body and blood were something real. So Teilhard, as you may know, in 1923 was out in the desert doing some of his scientific work, and it was a feast day, the feast day of the Transfiguration. The Transfiguration is the most cosmic Christ feast of the year. It's such a big feast in the Eastern Church that it is their biggest feast of the entire year. It's bigger than Easter or Christmas or Good Friday, the Transfiguration, because that was the event where Jesus took three of his best friends to the top of a mountain, and then he glowed in their presence. And they experienced that this is not just a good friend and a good rabbi, he's something else. But really was what Jesus was trying to show is we all have this in us. We can all glow, just like Thomas Burton experienced that day in Louisville at noon hour rush hour. He's crossing the street and all these strangers coming at him, and he saw them all glowing. And he said, and he wrote in his journal the next day, how do you tell people they're all walking around shining like the sun, S-U-N? Well, that's the cosmic Christ again, you see. And that's how you tell them. You teach them about the cosmic Christ. Well, so Teilhard out in the sticks on Transfiguration had no chalice and no bread and no altar. But he wanted to say Mass because he felt moved to do so. So then he did so, just with the words and with the earth as his altar. And here's something that he wrote about that. When through the mouth of the priest one says, hoc est corpus meum, this is my body, these words extend beyond the morsel of bread over which they are said. They give birth to the whole mystical body of Christ. But then he goes further. The effect of the priestly act extends beyond the consecrated host to the cosmos itself. The entire realm of matter is slowly but irresistibly affected by this great consecration. And he says the Eucharist then is part of the divinizing of the entire universe. That's his language. We see that is the language of the Eastern Church. Theosis, the divinizing of the cosmos, is the Eastern Church's definition of redemption. They don't follow Augustine down the rabbit hole of original sin. So for them, redemption is not about wiping away original sin. It is about divinization of the universe. Theosis is a Greek word for it. This is exactly what Teilhard is talking about. This is a quote from Teilhard, divinizing of the entire universe. Now, through your incarnation, my God, all matter is henceforth incarnate. This is Teilhard talking. The superstantial word is the immense host, which is the universe. It is made flesh. Through your own incarnation, my God, all matter is henceforth incarnate. So there is a continuous incarnation going on, and the ritual is part of it. But it's essentially a reminder that divinity is always incarnating in matter, all matter, in the whole, all the galaxies of the universe. And this is a truly real presence. He says, whether we like it or not, by power and by right, you are incarnate in the world. We are all of us dependent upon you. I firmly believe that everything around me is the body and blood of the word. In every creature I may discover and sense you, I beg you, give me faith. So that is faith for him, seeing divinity in every creature, seeing the Christ in every creature. So I think I'm supposed to stop now. I hope you've felt something of this dialogue between Jung and Teilhard, and you can pursue it more deeply yourself. But it too is a gift to the noosphere. When humans think together about important things, the questions that Jung is important. The questions Teilhard is important. This too is part of the noosphere. Our debates, our learning experiences. This is definitely part of the noosphere. So I think that in spending some time like we have with Teilhard and Jung, two very significant transformative agents in the 20th century, that, and of course, remember that there would be no Tom Berry without Teilhard. Teilhard is Tom Berry's mentor. Tom Berry was president of the Teilhard Society in New York for over 10 years. So Teilhard was a profound mentor to Thomas Berry. So we would have no Thomas Berry without Teilhard. So Teilhard's influence has been immense. I remember when the Vatican Council happened, one intelligent person said afterwards, the most important theologian at the council was Teilhard de Chardin. So no one talked about it. It wasn't explicit, he was there implicitly. Though another very important ally, another Frenchman of the time, that era, was my mentor, Père Chenou. And he was at the council. He was younger than Teilhard. And his presence was, I've been doing more and more research on him now, and his presence was very strongly felt. And it has been felt in the liberation theology movement, and certainly in creation spirituality too. But so I hope this is some resource as for your exploration of noosphere as you go along. So let me stop now and invite conversation or questions.
Well, I do want to thank you, Matt. Somebody should, he can't hear me. Okay.
I hear you.
You hear me? Oh,
Oh, yeah.
thank you. Thank you. How to immerse ourselves in this long tradition, this lineage, and to have it lined out for Jung and Teilhard, and then to Chenou and Thomas Berry, and to see what we're doing now as part of the kind of excavating our nature, even out of the earth. So it gives me a very rich framework for pursuing this, and I just want to thank you for your thoughts and your generosity of scholarship.
Well, thank you.
Matt, I have a
Yes.
question
Mhm.
that has to do with the collective unconscious and what you've been saying about Jung and the cosmic Christ, and any other way you might address that.
And what's the question?
It has to do with Jung's collective concept of the collective unconscious.
Uh-huh.
And how might that relate to the noosphere?
Oh, yeah. Well, of course, it relates to archetypes, relates to myth, which in many ways is, it relates to ritual. And in many ways, ritual is embodied myth. And so, I think it's everywhere really in the whole meaning of community, and the whole meaning of, well, the phrase that Gail used in the introduction of the beloved community, that we're in community at very deep levels. But as Jung would stress, you have to get to those deep levels because culture itself wants to encourage us to stay at the top. It's kind of like my image of Eckhart's image of the underground river, that we have to travel deep down the wells of our various traditions to come to that common underground river that Nicholas Akuza says. He says, we call ourselves by many religions, but we're only one religion, wisdom. And it is supreme, wisdom is a supreme and terrible beauty, he said. This is the 15th century. And he was a scientist, mathematician, and a cardinal in the Catholic Church. But he said, we're not many religions, we're one religion. But we have to, and he said, someday we will learn this. Someday we will realize we're all one religion. Well, I think that today is that day. I think a time of deep ecumenism is that day. And also a time of facing our extinction as a species, which we are facing today because of climate change. Plus, of course, potential for nuclear war. Both of those things, should rattle us in a deep way to come to this commonality that you're talking about, this common collective. But, and this must not be left out in the discussion about noosphere, is that evil too is sent out into the world and even into the noosphere. The noosphere is not necessarily always a pure place. We're like I looked up some of the internet stuff about the noosphere, and they're going on about what the wonderful web, the wonderful internet, blah blah blah. But the internet is also bringing together all these Nazis, and the QAnon conspiracy and all this craziness that's going on in our time. That also is coming from the internet and the web, etc. So there's no guarantee that the noosphere is going to be something positive unless we make it that, unless our values are strong enough that we can stand up to that shadow energy that obviously gains tremendous impetus from this invention of the web and the internet, is bringing the Nazis together, and is bringing the racists together, is bringing the white supremacists together. So we must not be naive and excessively optimistic, because the communal dimension that you talk about, Nazism brought a lot of people together too. And there is plenty of that necrophilia, what Eric Fromm called necrophilia, that profits from human intelligence and inventions and technology, as well as shared beauty and spirit. So, evil is real, and humans play an active role in evil. And we just have to read the newspapers or the internet and see it happening everywhere. That white supremacy has never had a better instrument than Facebook and these other platforms. Getting your hatred into the world is part of the sign of our times. So we all have to become more alert, and I think we have to put some guardrails on these inventions that we think are so glorious, but are not always so. They can be used for good or evil.
Thank you, Matt. We have several hands raised, lined up with questions. First or next up, Carol Kilby, please.
Oh,
Hello,
thanks,
Carol.
Bob. Hi, Matt.
Nice to see familiar faces.
It is not only familiar, but maturing and and engaged, understanding faces. So I think you just may have answered my first question. What difference does it make to understand that there is a noosphere, that that we are allured to, affected by, and affecting. We are agents of agency towards that greater global brain. And secondly, as you know, my passion is evolutionary rituals. How, through ritual, do you see us participating, shaping, responding to the noosphere?
Well, regarding the global brain, I think I prefer the word global mind that Eric Jantsch used, or even planetary mind that R. Weiler uses. But because a mind to me is more than a brain. I mean, to me, the word brain
Okay.
is almost reductionistic and mechanistic. And I think it feeds the materialistic consciousness of the modern era too readily. So I'd rather use the word mind, and especially for this reason. I've never met a being with a mind that didn't also have a heart. For me, the mind includes the heart. So it's not some physiological organ like a brain. It it includes love and caring, or what we were just talking about, hatred too, and projection. That's the mind's capable of that too, as we know. But I just think mind is a richer word than brain. To me, brain is almost a mechanistic word, and so I'm kind of cautious about using that word. Now, your second question was about ritual, and of course, that's a wonderful question. And of course, there's a reason why we call our cosmic mass the cosmic mass, because in ritual, you are connecting, it seems to me, to all time and space, and therefore beings. We're inviting the beings, including the angelic beings, angels, spirits, into our places. When I interviewed Lorna Byrne several years ago at Grace Cathedral, the woman who's had angel experiences since she was 2 years old, and wrote about them after they gave her permission when she was in her 60s and after her husband had died. The night before I interviewed her, she attended one of our cosmic masses, which was about the angels, which was held at the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. And I asked her what it was like for her, and she said, "Oh, the place was filled with angels. There were more angels there than humans," she said. And they were I remember she was climbing up the altar and flowing down like a waterfall or something. I said, "Well, that's an image that Hildegard Bingen talks about when she's talking about her angel experiences at Mass, in fact." So that our rituals should invite in all the beings, and including the spirit beings, the angels. And if they're interesting enough, I think the angels will come. I think the angels have been a little wounded by mechanistic rituals during the mechanistic time of modern consciousness and modern ritual, or lack thereof. I think that we have to give angels space to breathe, and humans too. This is why I think the cosmic mass is great, that people can dance and respond to images in their own way, but common images. So you have both things going on, the individual response, but to common elements, common experiences. So however we can translate that, we do it with music, of course. Music can bring people together, but I have trouble in a church where music means you're reading another text at each other. I think it's much better to invite people to share music where they're not reading it. It can be back and forth, for example. Of course, you find that a lot in the Black church, where there's an echo. So one person sings and then others respond. And I think there's much more energy in that, and freedom, space, than just having our nose in books again and calling it worship.
Right. Thank you, Matt. Next question comes from Tim.
Hi, Matt.
Hi, Tim. How are you doing?
Good,
See you
thank you.
again. Yeah.
Good to see you very much. Matt, my question to you this afternoon is about your thoughts on the relationship between the noosphere and artificial intelligence. I heard you say, we need guardrails in terms of or just some kind of norms to protect. Well, let's just say with the image of guardrails. I heard Ilya DeLeo and even somebody, I thought I heard a reference of Elon Musk, believe it or not, to the need for some kind of guardrail, some kind of ethical framing of artificial intelligence especially in business and politics. And I just wonder, you mentioned evil in the news. I just wonder about artificial intelligence at its kind of unrestrained dynamic, and what it portends. I'm just curious, what you think of that.
Well, I'm glad you're bringing that topic up, because I think that, like everything humans do, there's potential good and there's potential shadow. And for example, I think we were overly optimistic about things like the internet and so forth, like I was just talking about. That it's a great place for racism to flourish and so forth, and Nazism and craziness like QAnon. So we have to keep that in mind. And artificial intelligence is that way also. But there's another dimension in artificial intelligence that has this very negative side, and that is that a lot of the big money is, of course, corporate money. And a lot of the big expense in corporate work is workers. So let's get a machine. They will work 24 hours a day. They don't need time off for pregnancy. They don't need vacations and all this. So it becomes strictly a bottom line decision. And what it can do, of course, is to destroy work. Taking work away from human beings and giving it to machines and robots, that may be good for the bottom line of shareholders and multi-millionaire CEOs, but is it good for the society as a whole? Is it for the common good? Because humans need work, need jobs to survive, but they also need work for our own identity. People want to give back. That's what work is about, isn't it? And to deprive people of work so shareholders can make more money is a very dangerous path to go down. Very, very immoral. So yes, we must bring values into these. And who makes the decisions? Is it just the billionaires of the world who are currently trying to, in some places in America, buying politicians so that they don't have to pay any taxes at all? Are the rest of us fools? We got to pay taxes. And why are these rich people who don't even know what to do with their money, except maybe buy a space shuttle? It's crazy, and it is profoundly immoral. So I think we have to get back to the question of the common good. And there are many issues in robots, call them what you will, I call them robots, that are positive. There are some dangerous jobs out there that machines can do, and all that. That's fine. But all this stuff has to be examined with morality in mind, with moral questions, with common values in mind. But if it's a matter of throwing out all kinds of human workers to make more money for the owners, that is not for the common good. And it's just to drive people to, when people are unemployed, the drinking and drug rates go up, domestic abuse goes up, and self-hatred goes up. So these things have to be addressed. And we can't leave it to the corporations or the multimillionaire and billionaires or the denizens on Wall Street to make these questions, which are moral questions. I mean, to answer these questions alone, it has to be done, I think, as a community. And of course, that's politics, isn't it? Deciding what is for the common good and what isn't. And I would just say, I think it's common sense. Some of these robots or machines, artificial intelligence is going to be good, is going to be advancement. Some of it is not. So you've got to be smart enough to sit down and decide what's plus and what's minus. I mean, we do that every day. You know, when we're buying something, buying a house, what's good about this house? Well, what is negative? You know, it's just, that's what morality is, choosing, electio. That's the via creativa, electio, choosing. And we know this, so you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. You know, we can't throw out all the internet because racists are on it. But we have to think ahead a little bit when we put these new inventions out there and start brainstorming what's the shadow side to this? And what are the dangers? And who's winning and who's losing? And who's deciding and who has no choice? Who's not being given a choice? Let's not allow this to happen to us. Let's be participants. And I think that's what democracy means, that we choose together what are the best things for the common good.
Thank you very much, Matt. Thanks very
Thanks,
much.
Matt. Thanks, Tim.
Question.
Next question up from Damien. Not sure the pronunciation of your last name, Damien. You're muted, Damien.
You're muted. There you go.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, Matthew.
Hello again.
Um, my question is probably a little esoteric, but I've been studying spiritual multi-dimensions and our multiverse cosmos that several spiritual channelers have experienced and talked about. Some of them are the genuine ones seem to be nationally and internationally prominent and genuinely spiritual. So they talk about the spiritual multi-dimensions and that we have a multiverse cosmos, you know. And since I've read some of Chardin, but he's difficult for me. And I know he's very spiritual also. And when he talks about the new sphere, I'm just wondering if the new sphere has something to do with these spiritual multi-dimensions and multiverse cosmos that these spiritual channelers seem to have experienced and talked about. I don't know if you've had any thoughts about it, but I know it's an esoteric question.
Yeah, I don't think Gerard was thinking about multiverses, you know, when he was working in the 20th century. I think he was trying to respond to the theme of evolution and trying to integrate it into his Christian philosophy, if you will. I think that is what really occupied him. And of course, he always returns to the subject of matter, the holiness of matter. And with that, he's trying to undo the dualisms that have haunted Christianity for 2,000 years. And in that regard, I think he was moving out of the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. And I think Jung was doing that consciously as well, because he actually names it. But I think the particular questions you're raising, I don't think were on Teilhard's mind. It doesn't mean they wouldn't be if he were living today, but I think he had a lot of other salad on his plate to deal with. And we know, for one reason we know that is the trouble he got in. I mean, so many thinkers that day in the Catholic Church got in such trouble. By the way, Chanu, who I've mentioned, is something I've learned about him lately because I've been doing more research on him. I want to write a book on him and me. His book that got him condemned in 1942, put on the index. His book was put on the index in 1942. It was about education. He had a passion for reinventing theological education. He was head of the Dominican Sochoir, where Dominicans studied, and he tried to reinvent it by putting history in and so forth. And they put his book on the index. I think that's kind of amazing. I'm proud of him that his book was on the index, and it was about education. So education has been, as I've said, at least 50% of my work in my life, because I too have this realization that how we educate is so primary. And but that he was way back doing that in the 30s and then condemned in 1942 kind of moves me very much. But anyway, so he and Teilhard had kind of a parallel journey in light of their of the church at the time, but they didn't. Neither of them backed down. They went silent when forced to, but they didn't give up on their integrity or their pursuit of truth as he understood it. So like I say, I think Teilhard's plate was very full, including dealing with the murmurantes behind him, the hierarchy in Rome, and they had, his fascist Jesuit master general in the 40s. So they were in a place of survival as well. But this often happens. John of the Cross, I'm beginning a course next week on John of the Cross. I'm excited about it with the Carolyn Meese organization, if anyone wants to come on board. But I'm excited because I've been studying him for many years. And in a nutshell, what I've learned is that poets who translate him and love his work, they 90% of them agree that his poetry is great, but his commentaries detract from the poetry. They're not great. And I believe I have an answer to that. And the answer is that he was tied into the Purgation Illumination Union interpretation of spirituality back then. He didn't have the four paths. He had those three. And notice it begins with purgation. So, the whole idea of purgation comes through so strong when he's talking about the mortification of the senses and all this stuff. But the truth is that he was utterly creation-centered. That's what I'm going to show in the course, is it walk you through the four paths according to him. And the sad thing is he didn't have an invitation to interpret his own poetry through the four paths. So that's what we're going to do. And just one example, his first major poem he wrote in prison while being tortured by his own brothers. So it was a political poem. All of his writing is really political literature. It's prison literature. That was right. But his first poem, lengthy poem, is a he calls it the Canticle, named after the Song of Songs. It's a love story about longing for his beloved, who he ends up saying God is his beloved, but he ends up saying the mountains. My beloved is the mountains. My beloved is the springs and all that. Absolutely creation-centered, but he couldn't understand it that way, and that's why his commentaries take you down all kinds of roads that are not authentic. And also, I think part of his commentary is to take the Inquisition down those roads to get them off his back, because he sounds so masochistic that the Inquisition would be pleased. But anyway, I bring Shanu in, and I bring John the Cross in with Teilhard because they all suffered profoundly for sociological and religious reasons, that they were trying to reform religion, and this is what often happens when you push that button.
So Matt, we're very close to the ending, but we've got two people who've been very patiently waiting. Maybe we can squeeze them in before we close for the evening or for the afternoon. River Moon, please.
Yes, hello, Reverend Fox. I saw you speak years ago at East West Books about the Divine Feminine. When you talk about the cosmic Christ, do you understand the cosmic Christ is an expression of the divine feminine?
Yes, I think it has a lot of that to it. That's why I say a synonym for the cosmic Christ is cosmic wisdom. Of course, wisdom is feminine in the Bible, Chokmah in Hebrew and Sophia in Greek, and she's feminine around the world. She's over my right shoulder here. Kuan Yin is wisdom in the East. So anything cosmic is the great mother is a part of the relationship to the whole, and that's part of the maternal dimension, I think, of divinity. And the image I have is of a great cosmic mama with the universe in her lap. And I think that energy of wisdom, cosmic wisdom or cosmic Christ, that which holds all things together in heaven and the earth, which is Paul's language, but it's actually taken from books of wisdom in the Hebrew Bible. Yeah, all that comes through in the wisdom literature. Yeah. And of course, the relationship to nature itself, the nature as something holy and sacred, that's built into the wisdom teachings of Israel, which, by the way, we now know is the path that Jesus, that's the lineage that Jesus comes from, historical Jesus, that he was a farmer, a peasant farmer, his family was. And this is why so many of his stories are riddled with the imagery of nature and of small farming, seeds and bushes and sparrows and goats and sheep and lamb and all that. He was a country person. I was just talking to someone yesterday who, or 2 days ago, who's been to Israel, and he said, Jerusalem is a crazy place. And of course, there's all this conflict going on. But he said he goes to Galilee. He loves to go to Galilee. And it's so peaceful and tranquil. Even today, it's a beautiful place. It's a farming place, but small farms. And he says that's the place to go. And that's where the Sermon on the Mount was delivered. And so he went on about this stuff. But that was Jesus' home area. Going to Jerusalem was a going to the big city kind of a thing. And he didn't do a lot of that. And when he did, it was a pretty fatalistic choice at the end of his life.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt and River. Last question from Victoria, please. Victoria Marino.
Thank you. Martino, actually.
Martino, sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you for this really wonderful lecture. I'm sorry I'm coming at the end because I have a million questions for you. So I hope you'll come back. I particularly had some questions about Jung, but what I wanted to ask, I guess, since I'm reduced to one question is, I'm wondering to what degree the sort of reluctance to embrace the cosmic Christ is due to a general issue of ecumenism, and insofar as, as you said yourself, the Eastern Church has held on to that concept of the cosmic Christ really since the beginning, and we see it in Scripture already in Isaiah with the dwelling in the high and lofty place and in the human heart. The cosmic Christ is, or in Colossians. So the Eastern Church, and then, well, even starting before that with Irenaeus and going forward, it seems like it has stayed very robust. I have a lot of friends who are members of the Orthodox Church who say, oh, well, we've always had the cosmic Christ. What's new about that? So I'm wondering to what degree you see it as an issue that, Teilhard is gaining more and more ground every day, it seems, thanks to you and Cynthia Bourgeault and other people. But it still seems to be in more within the Catholic tradition, and I'm kind of waiting for a big dialogue between people like you and Cynthia Bourgeault with theologians from the Eastern tradition, and then also there's like Rudolf Steiner, and there are Protestant theologians like Moltmann and others who who brought in these, well, Steiner's not a Protestant, I didn't, that was another thing. But I just was wondering about that. I'd love to see a kind of a summit of scholars and theologians and religious leaders sort of within a more ecumenical context, really bringing all of this together, because everyone's sort of saying the same thing, but I feel like we're a small group of the faithful here. And even as someone remarked in the chat, even in terms of demographics, and I'm just wondering to bring in other, racial and ethnic backgrounds and other ages and other demographics, if you see a way to really make it cosmic, the dialogue itself.
Well, of course, one lineage that has never forsaken the cosmic Christ when it was true to itself is the Celtic tradition.
Right.
And
right.
that's what these theologians, Saint Irenaeus, for example, was Celtic. And of course, Hildegard was raised in a Celtic monastery in the Rhine. And of course, Nicholas Cusa was on the Rhine. Because Celts settled all the way down the Rhine, and Eckhart, and even Thomas Aquinas studied in Cologne and so forth. So that's really, and of course, Francis of Assisi in northern Italy, the Celts settled there too. So that's really where this tradition is alive and well. Now, of course, Celtic places like Ireland and Scotland have had to throw over some of the fall redemption religion that came down on them. The Jansenists, for example, who landed in Ireland after they were expelled from France in the 17th century, they did a terrible job in distorting a lot of Irish theology, if you will. But the Irish today are really recovering it. And of course, many of them have had to leave the church to do that. But the point is, and even that you made the connection between the Eastern Orthodox and the cosmic Christ, that remember that the Celts went east for their theology. They didn't get it from Augustine, the Southern Europeans. They got it from the Eastern fathers and all that, which is much more cosmic, as you say. So, and of course, the green movement today, the crisis that we're in regarding Mother Earth, this is waking everybody up, I think, plus the new science that is bestowing on us the beautiful stories and myths of the 13.8 billion years of our coming to be. So, all this is working, you might say, in favor of moving from the past Christology. Remember that the Council of Nicaea that gave us the Nicene Creed, which is recited still in Episcopal churches and Roman Catholic churches and many other churches as well. The Nicene Creed is from the 4th century, the very century that gave us Augustine, original sin, and the empire marrying the church. But the cosmic Christ, as you said, and as I said, comes from the earliest writers of the Christian Bible, Paul, and the Gospel of Thomas, too. And so to get back to the cosmic Christ, you kind of have to chill on the Nicene Creed. You don't have to throw it out. Like even original sin, I don't throw original sin out. I say put it on a back burner and argue about what it means, because the church has never made it clear what it means. For Augustine, it meant sexuality, and that's pretty crazy. But and it's made the church very neurotic around sexuality. But I say it's dualism. That's original sin, is dualism. But the point is that the Nicene Creed is the Nicene Creed. But if you look carefully at it, it actually has a cosmic Christ in the first few sentences.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But it says nothing about Jesus' teaching. There's not a word about love or the Beatitudes or anything there. It jumps from the incarnation to the cross, and boom, and then putting him up on a pedestal, making him the only Son of God. So it's strange. And really look at it. Look for what Jesus taught. There's not a word in there about what he was teaching. What got him crucified was that he was teaching something that was in opposition to the empire of the day. That's what got him killed, and it's missing. And why? Because an emperor, Constantine, made it happen. He brought the bishops together, and he had the last word, not theologians. So, that has to be taken with a grain of salt. So I say, put it on the back burner, and why don't we instead start creating creeds around the cosmic Christ? And we'd have a very different, and of course, in line with the historical Jesus and what he preached and taught that got him in so much trouble that the empire had to kill him. So, I think it's altogether valid to look at it that way. Why don't we have a first century Christology instead of a fourth century Christology, which was a very perverse century when Christianity took over the empire, and it's still riddled with that kind of attitude. That's where the racism comes. That's where the excessive exploitative capitalism comes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the genocide comes and all the rest. So I think it's over time. It's due and overdue to make that shift. Instead of just a quest for historical Jesus, let's have a quest for the cosmic Christ. And I wrote about that over 30 years ago in my book on the cosmic Christ. Maybe it's time now.
Definitely. Well, thank you. I hope you'll come back many times.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Victoria.
Thank you.
Penny.
Thank you so much, Matt. From the comments, you can read how grateful people are for the things you've touched upon today and the invitation to return at your earliest convenience, and we'd love to have you. This idea of how we activate the global kinship concept of the noosphere is all through the invitation creation spirituality gives us to see life through biophilia. And it's been a gift in my life and a number of people who have been with you over the years and are still coming to this today, as in our certificate program. I'd like to close with just a couple of deep breaths and an invitation to see Matt this summer in August at the Parliament of World Religions, where all going well and according to plan, he will be leading a techno-cosmic mass ritual that will have a gospel choir as part of the segue points. It's terribly exciting. It's going to be in Chicago in August. And if you can get there, having been to 2 in person, they are life-changing in their great spirit of humanity. And that said, next month, our guest will be Gail Warcello, a longtime colleague of Thomas Berry and who co-founded a monastery with him, and also very, very much part of the Sisters of Earth. So again, the noosphere in its newer forms coming to be, and how we can learn more about our place in the noosphere. So with that said, thank you again, Matthew. Thank you, Dennis, for helping us get this all organized.
Thank you,
Gail
all.
and Bob, and
Carry
to
on.
the many people that joined us today and the many that will see this on the recording. The Cosmic Mass in Chicago will be during the week of August 13th to the 19th. And I would imagine something will come out through one of our mechanisms to get more details to everyone. But if you can plan now to be there, it's just an inspiring place where the noosphere will be in action and alive through arts, through learning, through all the ways. And again, Matt, if you're reading the chats, such wonderful feedback from today's conversation. And I would say that that last comment about a summit about Teilhard, really, he deserves to be in the mind's eye. His message was so strong for us. Any other comments, colleagues?
I just invite everybody to unmute and say, give some accolades and words of gratefulness to Matt simultaneously. We'll just all do it together.
Oh, Cynthia.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Matthew.
So much.
God bless.
Be well.
Good night.
Bye.
Be well.
So much.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks all.
I'm
All
gonna
of
call
you.
Cynthia and
Cynthia,
make
next
that
one.
suggestion.
Call who?
I'm gonna call Cynthia Bergeau and make the suggestion that the two of you guys get together. I think it's a great idea.
I think Matt's gone off. Matt's gone off, but pursue it and we can help you if you don't have a road to Matt. We can help you with that.
Excellent.
Yes, and if anyone has suggestions for future guests, please, get it to us via our feedback, which I don't actually know what that mechanism is right now.
Just send it back. Use the address that sent you the message.
Okay.
And I think I'm looking for somebody now, since we had the dogs at the beginning and Matthew brought up the animals. Is there somebody who can talk about animal and a plant and mountain consciousness? I wonder if we could, if you know somebody, love to hear about it.
Hey, Gail, my son was a mountain climber. He could talk about mountain spirituality. Yeah, I might. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd see what we could do there.
Okay. Okay. Before we close it down, you want to put it in the chat there? How I can get a hold
Well,
of it?
I'll get it. I'll have to talk to him first.
Better talk to him first, right?
Good plan.
Yeah, I don't want to commit anybody to anything.
Especially
No.
your son.
Yeah.
Don't talk for your son. Yeah.
Well, we hope to see you next month for Gail. Gail is a wonderful presenter.
Thank you
Yes.
so
All right.
lovely.
Thanks all for being here today.
Terrific. Bye.
Here we go. How are we?
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye. Goodbye. Don't be strangers.
We're all very strange.
Yeah. Nice to see names and people. Yeah.
I'd really be interested in talking. You had somebody on your call today who is Alexandra Caverly-Lowry, and she used to do liturgical dance with and for Matt early on, and she's so the whole idea of dance as a language of kinship, global kinship. Yeah, also somebody that's here and leads dance at previous cosmic masses and world parliaments. Oh, her name is escaping me, but
to Ellen Kennedy.
Thank you, Ellen Kennedy. I'm excited about learning more about dance and Daniel, of course, in terms of music, Daniel Barber, and the whole understanding of new languages for ritual, and that all being opposite to something Matt said today we talked about ritual as mechanistic. And so how do we move to these non-mechanistic rituals? So as kinship, for kinship.
Well, I think about the dance, when we used to do dances, circle dances, which I'd love to do again, that moving all together, when people get really moving all together, when you become one, you become this one organism, and how wonderful and satisfying it is. So when you say that, that's what I think of. Yeah.
I don't know if this is the place to talk about it, so shut me up if it isn't, but
I guess Penny and Bob. Okay, well, I'm listening.
yeah. So I had an experience in rewriting something that I call an evolutionary cosmic communion, where it probably was mechanistic, and I thought it was all done. And I woke up the next morning and thinking, oh my gosh, this isn't done at all. And I envisioned this cosmic communion outside, and the altar being of Teilhard's vision of on the earth, and using the fruits of the earth and water as the elements. And what came to me the next day was that we needed to dance in a spiral. It's a spiral dance. You know how it goes in and then it comes back out.
Yeah.
And
positive and negative.
Yeah. And so that's my new discovery about the cosmic mass needing, or the cosmic communion needing to be danced into the center, picking up the fruits of the earth and the water and going back out. And I really want to do this now. And to Penny, I really want to do it as part of a cosmic mass. All right, that's my vision expressed out into the noosphere.
Let me tell you one thing that Tim Coles did at our church when the spiraling into the center, which that spiraling into the center, that center of the wheel. And he gave the congregation, since he's trying to take what we did in our creation spirituality worship and bring it into the congregation. So he gave them a picture of a spiral. And he had them, while he was singing, them take their finger, go on the spiral, like maybe a finger like. And then when they got into the center, they didn't go back on the ink spiral. They went back on the negative space.
Oh yeah.
So there was a negative positive piece. I thought that was wonderful.
It is. The coming together of these ideas, or the expanding of something that hasn't been given words, is just so helpful. One of the things, I don't know
if they're really here or not. 7 people are still here, so I don't know. They aren't talking, so I don't know. What they're waiting for, they need me to turn them off. I don't know.
About ritual and about the noosphere as a way, can we in ritual presence into the noosphere the future that we want? I heard that I heard Swim say something about that.
Yeah, well, I think once you're in the circle, you are probably building the noosphere yourself. I mean, you're building it, you feel it. When I talked about everybody being together, that would be part of creating that. Because even though you've gone from the circle, you still remember, you still hold that memory. I mean, that's how tiny the parts are,
Genetic nature of it. Presencing into the genetic memory. That's on an individual level, or maybe not, maybe bigger. What do you think?
Yeah, it can be a group. Sit around talking. Don't you remember the time we did this? Yeah. Well, the noospheres, I know, I'm not is built of communities, like quantum physics, built of small communities. And so that would be something that probably has some form, expression, and community.
Well, Gail, you have a great deal to offer us about noosphere. I imagine that's what had you recommitting to this webinar. And
I've been on this before I knew the name noosphere.
yes,
I would describe this way that everybody is working on, they're increasing their consciousness. And though you don't have everybody, you don't need everybody, you just need 10%. And all this, to make a paradigm shift. And so that's what I was wanting to spend my time on, was working on that. And now I've got a name. So, and a really smart guy who created that name. So yeah, so now with the noosphere, it just adds a lot of power to it, and connection, and a lot of momentum. I believe right now, though, it is the words. I mean, simultaneously, it is the word now. Everybody's talking about it suddenly. Everybody's talking about it, and that's why we don't know that we're really connected to each other, but we are.
yeah,
And, yeah.
yeah. Okay. I've enjoyed talking with
Me too. Thanks for staying.
you. Okay, my dear.
All righty, bye. Have a good evening. And blessings to you all that have stayed with us. If you're really here, we just see your names, and I'm going to press end now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.